From the marbled halls of power to the hardscrabble streets of America, I'm Tom LoBianco, longtime reporter and your host for the show today. Today, special guest Matthew Taylor, PhD. He's an expert on the Christian right and what I like to call the new Christian right. This ain't your mom and dad's evangelical world. This is something entirely different where they blow shofars as they storm the Capitol on January 6th. You might have heard about them. You probably haven't because this stuff has been sub rosa for a long time. And I'm hoping to, with our interview with Matt Taylor here in a second, we're going to dive deep. We're going to learn more about it. We're going to learn why it's different than the old evangelical right. Very different, but there are some similarities. Before we get to that, reminder, you can reach out to me at tom at 24site.news if you want to see something, got a guest, anything you'd like to cover. Always sign up, 24site.news. Catch us every day here at noon and also on the replay, the encore, over at Political Voices Network at 8 p.m. Eastern. Got a fun week coming up. Well, fun as the news goes, I should say. Tomorrow we're going to be getting into the shutdown. Yay, fun. Not exactly. And if you're affected by the shutdown, if you're furloughed, you're going without a paycheck, drop me a note. I'd like to hear from you. All right. I want to hear about what it's like going paycheck to paycheck or not paycheck to paycheck, depending on how long this goes. I'll be having on Julie Grace Prufke, my colleague at 24 Site News, and Mike Sarasso, a longtime Democratic communicator, to talk about the impacts of the shutdown tomorrow. Thursday, we're talking Dirty Jersey. The Dirty Jers. Yes. If you're from Jersey, you're allowed to call that. I'm like Jersey adjacent, so I'll keep the Dirty Jers stuff to a limit. They got a big election going on up there. Big debate this week, and it was as nasty as you'd expect for a Jersey knife fight. And then we're going to wrap the week with some surprise polling. Surprising poll results. I won't tell you just yet about it. That would ruin the surprise. All right. Tom24site.news. Sign up 24site.news. I'll catch us every day. YouTube, Substack. All right. Let's jump into the news here. So let's bring on, I like to read the Drudge Report and I love the Drudge Report. And, it can be a little hyperinflated, a little exaggerated, but it's a great place to find relevant, top performing news, things that we need to know about. Top of Drudge says blast. It's like New York Post tabloid, so you can't really trust the headline. But the blast on Drudge says, "Are we heading into World War III? NATO braces for World War III." Well, I don't think so. Based on past performance, not likely. You never know these days. But here's the basis for that story. Let's take a look at the BBC. Headline: Trump says he may send Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. It's from Harry Sekulich and Lara Ghazi. Oh, and to my creator friends out there, newsfluencer world, whatnot, cite the sources, guys. Cite the sources. It's what I do so that we all know what's going on. Always cite your news sources, because guess what? If you gobble them up and you don't give credit, you take all the money from them, one day they won't be there. All right. Very happy to have the BBC reporting on this. And I love BBC coverage. Headline: Trump says he may send Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. Harry Sekulich, Lara Ghazi. Top: U.S. President Donald Trump is considering sending long-range Tomahawk cruise missiles to Ukraine. Asked by reporters on Air Force One on Sunday whether he would provide Kyiv with Tomahawks, Trump replied, "We'll see, I may." The missiles would be a new step of aggression in Ukraine's war with Russia, he said. This follows on a phone call on the weekend between Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who pushed for a stronger military support to launch counterattacks against Russia. Zelensky has said he'll meet with Trump in Washington on this Friday, for talks that will focus on air defense and long-range capabilities. So just before we go a little deeper on this, it's Trump, all right, and Putin, all right, two people not known for carrying through on every promise and every statement. And I mean, even as Trump goes, that's quite the hedge, right? We'll see. Maybe I might do it. Maybe. All right. You could put that in the taco category of tariffs if you want. But he's been changing his stance a lot. It feels like a lifetime since he rolled out the red carpet in Alaska for Vladimir Putin, and since Putin made a fool of him by not ending the war in Ukraine, by not agreeing to a ceasefire, by not abiding by peace promises, by continuing these vicious attacks in this long-running land war in Europe. It'd be hard to overstate the importance of that. A land war in Europe. Okay? Things are on edge. So, this turnabout recently, or seeming turnabout by Trump, again, it's Trump and Putin. Let's take a look at what a tomahawk would do. Let's head over to everybody's favorite encyclopedia. It's my favorite encyclopedia, Wikipedia. Here is the Tomahawk missile. As I was reading about this earlier today, I realized the wingspan of this thing goes from the floor to the ceiling. Right here at the 24/7 News studios in suburban DC. That's a big freaking missile. And it can apparently carry a nuclear warhead. Not that there's no talk of that, I should note, but it could if it wanted to. Here's the BGM-109 Tomahawk Land Missile, TLAM, is an American long-range, all-weather, jet-powered subsonic cruise missile used by the U.S. Navy, Royal Australian Navy, the Royal Netherlands Navy, and the Royal Navy, Her Majesty's, in ship and submarine-based land attack operations. Developed right here in good old Maryland at the APL Applied Physics Laboratory of Johns Hopkins University under James H. Walker near Laurel, Maryland. The Tomahawk emerged in the 1970s, a modular cruise missile manufactured by General Dynamics. Now, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. Let's take a look at range. This is the big question. And you've seen, all right, let's go back in time long, long ago to when Zelensky and Ukraine did a major surprise drone offensive in the heart of Russia. All right, so these are not border skirmishes. All right, that really shocked Putin and the Russians. All right, this could be similar if resorted to, if it should happen. Let's take a look down here at the range. All right, can you break past the border skirmishes into the heart of Russia, into tactical targets like energy supplies? All right, and here is the production specs. Engine. William International F107 WR402 turbofan using TH dimer fuel and a solid fuel rocket booster. Range. Take a look at this. 1,500 miles. There's shorter range, 900 miles. There's also shorter block 3, 700 miles, block 4, H64. So this is it now for comparison's sake. Let's see if we're doing 700 miles. That's roughly as the crow flies from here to Chicago. Okay. That's getting pretty deep in there. If you double it, 1,550, 1,600, you got some incredible capability there in the heart of Russia. All right, let's go on while we're on the Pentagon. And before we bring in Matt Taylor, I want to move on to while we're in the war zone here. This is also at the top of Drudge. Probably seen this already. Pete Hegseth. Yes, my ad blocker is on always. Sorry, guys. Yahoo News. I love Yahoo picking up Daily Beast, which invariably will pick up something else. So anyway, let's see who they actually cite here. Daily Beast. Pentagon Pete fires fat soldiers as war on weight rages. William Valancourt. Monday, October 13th. Yesterday. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth proudly shared the news Monday that some Texas National Guard troops who didn't meet physical fitness standards have been replaced. Hegseth, who has said that fat troops and fat generals are unbecoming of the U.S. military, declared that the standards are back in his department after some members of the Texas National Guard showed up in Illinois apparently overweight. And here's task and purpose. Yes. All right. So here's our original right there, a photograph. Let's see if we can get the photo. All right. Look, guys, it's the National Guard. We all have friends in the National Guard. If you're listening, hell, you probably even serve in the National Guard. All right. It's the friggin' National Guard. It's not active duty. It's not full enlistment. All right. Um, are they overweight? The hell, I'm overweight. All right. You're not designed for active duty. It's not what it's meant for. All right. But it's what they're doing anyway. All right. Reminder, get in touch at tom24site.news. Before I went to you up, Matt Taylor. Now, I'm really pumped about this because, as you know, I'm going to do a quick read here before we hop on to Matt here in a second. I wrote about this in my biography of Pence, Piety and Power. I wrote about the faith, the religion. I think that's really important for understanding where we are right now. And frankly, a lot of political reporters, myself included previously, really stay away from this stuff. We veer away from it. Two things you're not supposed to talk about in polite company: politics and religion. And if you don't talk about it, you'll never understand it. Here's some news today out of the New York Times. A Bible-infused English curriculum down in Texas. Byline Troy Closen today, October 14th. Interesting read. Inserting, now this is not, it does not read as total theocracy based on how I was looking at it earlier, but it does start to infuse more of Jesus in history in some English. So 300 of the state's roughly 1,200 school districts signed up to use this English language arts lesson, which puts more Jesus in there. All right. Let's take a look at this. I fell down the rabbit hole reading up on Matt earlier this year for a different project I was working on. And I want to talk about, this is a really good piece right here. This is his interview on NPR from last year, just before the election. New book examines a group of charismatic Christian leaders and their ties to January 6th attack. And we'll be talking about this term right here. If you guys are not Protestants, you're not theologians, this is an important term right here. Perhaps even should be capitalized. More on that in a second. Here's this with Aisha Roscoe. Matt Taylor tracks 50 charismatic Christian leaders who were in DC on January 6th, and they all have ties to this thing called the New Apostolic Reformation. What is that? Okay, to answer that question, I'm going to bring on Matt Taylor. Matt, how are you, man?
I'm doing well, Tom. How are you?
I'm doing good, brother. Hey. I love this. I do. I love that. Byline, Dateline, Baltimore, Maryland.
Charm City.
Right, baby. Harm City if you go too far east or west. Well, I'd say that. I'm from Baltimore. How's it going, man?
I all things considered, I'm doing all right. I have a 6-month-old at home, so I get like snuggles with a beautiful infant multiple times a day. So the world is going to hell. I have inner peace.
That's right. Isn't it amazing? Is this your first?
This is our third.
Oh, oh, wow. Oh, okay. Well, you've been through the magic already. Okay, I'll save that. There's more magic. On the board right now, Ian Walters is number 5. They just had their 5th baby down in Southern Maryland. Yeah. So congrats, man. Welcome back to reality, or whatever this is.
A dark reality, if it is reality.
Matt, give us a little background for folks who don't know. I mean, if we're not like super huge theological nerds, if we don't listen to Faith Pod, I mean, I listen to Faith podcasts periodically, but for those who are just, the casual political observer, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I grew up evangelical Christian in Southern California, variety of different theological traditions, churches, and then worked in Christian ministry for about 7 years, working with college students. Attended Fuller Theological Seminary, a evangelical seminary in Pasadena, California, and then made a real shift in my life and stopped calling myself evangelical. Didn't really fit theologically in that world anymore. I'm still a Christian, but I wouldn't describe myself as evangelical, and that term itself is constantly changing in its meaning. But I went and did a PhD at Georgetown University in Muslim Christian dialogue and in theology. And now I work at an institute in Baltimore called the Institute for Islamic, Christian, and Jewish Studies, where I'm a senior Christian scholar. We work on peace building. I continue to do all kinds of research into Christian extremism. Also still keep a foot in Islamic studies.
Wow. So you picked some very boring stuff, which is not a keg of dynamite at all.
Yeah, I talk about all those things you're not supposed to talk about at the dinner table constantly.
I've been wanting to talk to you for forever, because I feel like, when I see so much coverage, I was thinking recently the shooter in Minnesota. And he left the manifesto, and I was listening to a piece, and I was like, oh my God, that's NAR, like what he was talking about. But then you hear his story, and he bounced around between these like cultish style, Christian style, I say that very purposefully, groups for years before writing that. What is the New Apostolic Reformation?
So the New Apostolic Reformation is a set of leadership networks, Christian leadership networks, that were organized beginning in about the mid-1990s, had their heyday in the early 2000s. Hundreds of leaders in these networks. Almost everyone in those networks would be what we would call independent charismatics. So this is a subsect of evangelicals, a kind of subculture within evangelicals. Independent is a synonym for non-denominational. So these are almost entirely people who are non-denominational. They don't belong to these bigger traditions, bigger coalitions. And then charismatic in the Christian sense of the word, right? In the generic vocabulary, charismatic just means you have a very attractive and magnetic personality, right? Well, this word actually originates from the Greek and is used in the New Testament. And in the Christian sense, charismatic refers to Pentecostals and other Christians who are very invested in the more supernatural dimensions of Christianity, right? So it's a spirituality within Christianity. And you can find it within Pentecostalism. There are these non-denominational charismatics. There are charismatic Catholics. In fact, Amy Coney Barrett grew up in a charismatic Catholic community. And so these are Christians who emphasize these supernatural dimensions, often through things like speaking in tongues, through very experiential worship, give experiences of healing, whether inner healing or physical healing, and often believe in modern prophecy, that there are prophets today who can prophesy words from God for communities and for individuals.
Yes. It is. It's astounding, because in many ways to me it feels very different from what in the political world we would consider to be kind of like the Christian right, capital M moral majority, Ralph Reed, all right, the big box mega churches of the 90s. What does it look like?
Well, so if we do think back to the 80s and 90s, the Christian right that emerged out of there was very much coming out of the more institutional and denominational forms of evangelicalism. And the people that I write about and study, they were kind of on the margins of the rise of the religious right in the 1980s and 1990s. There were people like Pat Robertson, is an independent charismatic, was pretty involved in Central, but he was kind of an outlier in that world. And so it was more the kind of Jerry Falwells, the James Dobsons, these kind of suit wearing, right, very buttoned up, kind of denominational, conventional evangelical leaders. What Trump has ushered in, and this began almost as soon as he hit the scene as a presidential candidate in 2015, is he has brought from the fringes a bunch of these independent charismatic figures, including a bunch of New Apostolic Reformation leaders. And really central to that story has been Paula White Cain, who is Trump's closest religious advisor. She's an independent charismatic. She's a televangelist, a megachurch pastor, has even called herself an apostle. And so within that world, these folks, and this is very similar to what's happened in the Republican Party overall, right? These figures who were previously marginal tended to carry some more kind of extreme ideas, more far right in their ideology have been brought into the center of the new religious right that we're seeing today. Trump and MAGA has kind of moved the people who were at the center of the conversation out to the margins, sometimes driven them out of the conversation entirely. And now we have this new leadership cohort, often built around these more new Apostolic Reformation and charismatic ideas and identities, and pushing the administration in more extreme directions than we've ever seen the Christian right push an administration.
Yeah, this is part of the reason I teed up that Times piece with the Texas curriculum is because that kind of hits on this concept. And so much of what when we look at like Trump, this modern conservatism, and I really hate to use that term because I feel like it doesn't grasp like this post ideological move
Right.
that's happening on the American right, and even that term, the right, really doesn't grab it either. But part of the reason I brought that up is because it seems like, we talk about Trump as an accelerant. We talk about like an amplification. We talk about elements that have always been there, but more so. And the curriculum really kind of touches on. It's not Oklahoma. It's not the guy who just stepped down. I can't remember the school superintendent out there, but
Ryan Walters.
Yeah, that's it. Yes. It's not as extreme as that, but it sounds like this thing called the Seven Mountains Mandate. What is that?
So the Seven Mountains is a prophecy, right? And I just said there's a lot of people in this world, and these charismatics, they tend to believe that there are prophets. And so there was a prophet who was very involved in the New Apostolic Reformation. His name's Lance Wallnau, fairly prominent commentator today on the Christian right. And Wallnau, around the year 2000, claimed that he, in interaction with other charismatic leaders and hearing some of their ideas, received this prophecy of the Seven Mountains. And the idea is that the world is locked in spiritual warfare between the forces of Satan and the forces of God. And that in every society, the forces of Satan are trying to take over and control that society. And they imagine the different arenas of authority and kind of coalitions within society as mountains. And so there's 7 of these. There's government, family, education, religion, arts and entertainment, media, and then commerce and business, right? And each one of those is its own mountain. And in every society, the top of those mountains are either controlled by Satan and the demons or by God and the Christians. And there's no in between. And then the mandate part, because it's called the Seven Mountain Mandate, the commandment from God, according to this prophecy, is for Christians to take over every one of the 7 mountains in every society that they can in order to have Christian influence flow down from the top. And I'll just observe, right? If we go back and think back about the religious right of the 1980s and 1990s, they had an agenda to Christianize society, right? They wanted to see our society be more Christian. They were playing within the rules of democracy, right? We were the moral majority. And if we can just get Christians voting and using their demographic power, then we can change Christianize society, right? It was a grassroots effort to kind of mobilize Christians in order to accomplish certain conservative Christian agenda items, right? The Seven Mountain Mandate is not that, right? This is a minoritarian mindset saying that there's a subsect of Christians who understand this calling and they need to take over positions of power and influence, and then the influence will flow down. This is a top-down restructuring of society. And as you noted, education is one of the mountains. In fact, it's one of the most important mountains in their strategies, because they recognize that if you can revise the way that children are educated, then a generation down the road, that becomes the new reality, right? If you instill Christian nationalist narratives in children, they believe, then they will that becomes the new status quo, the new normal. And so they've always targeted education, especially since Trump has kind of come on the scene, because education is seen as one of the key battlefields for these culture wars that they want to prosecute.
I just, for folks who don't know, and if you're just joining us, I've got Matthew Taylor He is a PhD Georgetown at ICJS up in Baltimore now. Former evangelical, studied. If you don't know this, Fuller Theological Seminary is really huge in the evangelical community, theologically speaking. All right, and I like to separate out politicized evangelicals from the faith and the practice, because that's a politicized, generally speaking, and that could be left or right. All right, I mean, a smaller subset within that broader practice. Matt Taylor's here with us, and I'll put the links in here later. But make sure he's got a great book that came out last year, the Violent Take It by Force, right? Right, on January 6th. You guys have to understand this. I've been wanting to get to this for a long time, because I think when folks in secular society, I'm a proud lapsed Catholic, even as I try to raise my kid a proper Catholic, it's amazing I don't instantaneously incinerate when I walk into church, but we don't know this stuff. I was working on I still am, rather, I should say, wrapping up a profile of the Indiana Lieutenant Governor, who is I'm 98% certain is an NAR. Certainly a charismatic Pentecostal.
Mike, what's his last name?
Yeah, Beckwith.
Beckwith, that's right. Yep. Oh yeah, he's on my radar.
like, like any good Pentecostal pastor turned political leader, they caught him, his staff, watching deep fake porn of other women in the State House recently.
Well,
I mean, hey man,
they preach the stuff, you don't expect them to live it, do
you? I sat through a service at his church, and it's it's like what you might call one of the garage churches. All right, it's a low church. It's out in ex-urban Indy, and I've never gone. This is actually my first Pentecostal service, and I sat through it, and the preacher was up there talking about oh God, what was he talking about? He's talking about don't pray to the Virgin Mary. She's not a virgin. She never stayed that way. These other people have it wrong. Don't trust the people that pray to saints, because they got it wrong. Go right to the big man himself. Don't listen to the people. And when I heard that in the church, I was thinking to myself, I was like, man, they really don't like immigrants, do they? And I was like, whatever. Like 2 weeks later, I'm back home and here in suburban DC. And I lost my keys, and I said a prayer to St. Anthony. And I'm like, oh, Mother Mary, they're talking about me.
You papists, lapsed papists, are still papists.
the string being pulled right now. Direct line from here to the Vatican.
Yep. It's funny because within these kind of New Apostolic Reformation circles, so part of what the central thing that really delineates this from more mainstream conventional evangelicalism, much less Christianity, is that they believe in modern day apostles and prophets, right? And so their leaders, almost all the leaders who joined these NAR networks in the 1990s and early 2000s, identify themselves as either apostles or prophets or both. And if you know the Christian tradition and what those terms, the weight that those terms carry, right? Apostle and prophet, these are ancient forms of Christian leadership that are referenced within the New Testament, but that is like the apex of authority within the Christian tradition, right? The apostles are the original disciples of Jesus, the founders of the Christian church. And so the NAR is part of this modern phenomenon of leaders claiming these titles of apostle and prophet and trying to lay claim to the authority, the kind of ground level, ultimate authority within the Christian tradition, at least humanly speaking, right? And so it's interesting that they would be going around chastising people for praying to saints and having intermediaries between man and God, because like the apostles and prophets literally exist on a different plane for these folks and are like these spiritual elites who can hear directly from God and guide the church into the God's agenda, right? Isn't that what saints are supposed to do? Isn't that what popes are supposed to do? Right? Like, so they're just kind of created a different hierarchy, and then they're bad-mouthing the hierarchies of others.
I mean, it's not, it's not unlike, and I was thinking a lot about this because, see this, especially around Peter Thiel. Elon Musk, I don't think really is into it, but Thiel, man, boy, he is deep into this stuff. Um, and this crossover between these Curtis Yarvin types. If you look at, I was thinking about this, and I can't remember if you use this term or I just thought it up or whatever, but it's kind of the post-denominational aspect of this is also very similar to the tech world. Some of the tech elite, I should notice, not all the tech oligarchs, who want a post-institutional society, and it crosses over in these secret talks where you have Peter Thiel, who is an openly gay man, who I don't think any charismatic Pentecostal leader would ever support in his open, sexuality about this, calling climate activist the Antichrist. All right. And this blending of the religion and the state and the politics, to me, is really astounding because, as you noted before, the old, what a lot of us grew. I mean, I'm 43, so what we grew up with, understanding what the Christian right had boundaries to it. It was never fully merged with the state and with the Republican Party.
Yeah, and the New Apostolic Reformation is a very influential leadership network within this broader space among American and global evangelicals that we could call that independent charismatic space, right? The place where non-denominationalism and charismaticism intersect. That is the fastest growing segment of Christianity in the US and globally. It's roughly doubling in size every 20 years right now for the last 60 years. And it is, so it's growing very rapidly. In fact, when Peter Wagner, who was in many ways kind of the godfather and founder of the New Apostolic Reformation, when he was first getting started, he was toying around with an alternate title called the post-denominational church. Right? And so the idea is to move beyond denominations, move beyond these kind of more democratically and bureaucratically governed institutions, and center authority around charismatic individuals, these apostles and prophets, and then trust that those people hear directly from God and they can lead the church, and they don't really need accountability because they're so godly. And if you think about the model of Silicon Valley, right, the kind of cult of the founder and the authority and the accolades that go to these founders, I sometimes refer to the independent charismatic space as the Silicon Valley of the global church, because again, it's a lot of entrepreneurial leaders, a lot of excitement and energy, a lot of new technology. These people are just prolifically online, fantastic at using social media to build their followers. Some of these leaders have millions of followers online, but most mainstream Christians have never heard of them because they're existing in these kind of margins and fringes. But they're very good at building and destroying things, right? They're very good at breaking things. Not a lot of accountability or regulation because there's no denominational structures, right? And so it's kind of this Wild West freewheeling culture of all of these entrepreneurial leaders claiming authority from God and just going out and doing their new thing. And you can see how that kind of a leadership culture would synchronize very well with the modern far right under MAGA. And in fact, especially since January 6th, those two worlds have really just merged to the point where, is Micah Beckwith a pastor or a political influencer or a candidate for office or all of the above? That's kind of the reality now. It's very hard to just neatly categorize people because it's all cross-pollinated. It's all kind of interconnected on the far right today.
Oh my God. It is yes. Beckwith's thing is a nonstop reality TV show on purpose based on my reporting. And there will be more on that. I don't want to blow up a certain scoop right now.
Good, yeah.
Guys. All my Hoosier friends. Lindsay, I see you. What's up, Lindsay? Love you. I see you. I don't even have the stream open right now. I know you're there. I know you're with it. It'll be out eventually. Swear to God. Okay. Or I swear to Beckwith, rather, I guess I should say. What's it? I'm going to ask a snarky and purposefully naive question here, because so much of politics, and to me, this sounds an awful lot like a massive grift. What determines that? Like, why can't I just sit here right now and say I am the king of all charismatics and the only intermediary between everybody in the world and God himself? Like, What?
Well, so there are certain social conventions within this world. I think sometimes when we hear non-denominational, especially for folks who their formation within Christianity has happened within denominational context, they imagine non-denominational as this kind of unformed space, right? Just the absence of something. But the reality is, especially among charismatic non-denominational churches, they form networks. They form relational and social networks. And so, and just to give an example, so one of the New Apostolic Reformation leaders is a guy named Che On. And Che On is a pastor in Pasadena, California, graduate from Fuller Seminary, so kind of a fellow alum with me. And Che On is a pastor of a megachurch. He is running for California governor right now. He is also he took a COVID resistance case all the way to the Supreme Court and won against Governor Gavin Newsom in early 2021. Che On is the apostle over a network called Harvest International Ministries. And all of the churches and ministries in this network look to Che On as their apostle. He's kind of the godfather over this whole network. 25,000 ministries in his network in 70 countries. Not 25,000 people, 25,000 ministries, churches, NGOs, nonprofits, revival ministries, all looking to Che On as their apostle. Harvest International Ministry is about 10 times the size of the Vineyard Association of Churches, which most evangelicals have heard of as a kind of charismatic evangelical denomination. 10 times the size of it. Nobody's ever heard of Harvest International Ministry because it flies under the radar because it's not an institution that people typically track, right? It's operating in this non-denominational space. It's this kind of lateral network, except all built around Che On and his authority.
It takes a lot to get me flabbergasted these days. Damn, I just forgot my next question. This feels like you remember like Thomas Friedman came out with a book like a decade ago where he was talking about these Chinese mega cities, like dozens of New Yorks sprinkled throughout China as it was ascending in power.
Yep.
And to me, it feels like that. It's like I didn't even realize China had a New York, let alone dozens. I'm flummoxed by this.
This is the reality, right? Is technology is driving this, disaffiliation and kind of just disillusionment with institutions is driving this. People are migrating out of more conventional churches into these upstart, energetic. I mean, if you go to a charismatic worship service like you did, right? Great music, right? And it's very experiential, very immersive, right? Very personable, very, very kind of tailored to the individual experience, right? And gravitational, right? And there's churches that are leaving denominations to become non-denominational charismatics and join these apostolic networks because they're like, ooh, isn't this exciting to have an apostle over our church? Won't that make us more agile? And it does, right? If you have only one person making decisions, you can be very, very agile. You can be very, very quick moving and adaptive. But then again, there's no accountability for that person. And so we've seen a rash of child abuse and sexual abuse scandals among many of these apostles in recent years. Not because, oh, this is a new thing and suddenly they're verging into child. It's just being exposed, right? They've created a system that is almost made in a lab to cover up and hide sexual abuse because you have a leader who claims that he hears directly from God and it virtually has no regulation within his congregation or in his network. And these are very egotistical people, right? And who sense that God has anointed them for a special purpose, and maybe they're justified in doing harmful things to other people because they're so special, right? I mean, it is a very, very dangerous matrix. And the more that it has merged with the Trump movement, and those, I mean, the New Apostolic Reformation network, this network of leaders, they are the key theological architects of Christian Trumpism. And building this mythos around Trump, using these prophecies. If you've heard Trump compared to Osiris, that comes out of the NAR. If you've heard Trump compared to Jehu, that comes out of the NAR. If you've heard these ideas of Trump is specially anointed for office by God and has a purpose to remake America, that comes out of the NAR. And so they've used these kind of charismatic prophecies and theologies to imbue Trump with this almost messianic quality. And they have reaped the benefits all for a number of years now from aligning with him.
Folks, if you're just hopping on now, you missed the top of the show. My guest today is Matthew Taylor, and he has a book that came out last year, the Violent Take It by Force. He's an expert on this, the new Apostolic Reformation, and we're talking about how this is tied to Trumpism and this extremism that we are seeing right now, both in terms of the religion and now also the state. A reminder, if you're watching us on YouTube, like, share, subscribe. All right. Help support us. We're independent as well. That does help support Matt. You can find him on Substack. We're not, I listened to your podcast with the one Bradley Onishi put together.
Revival Fury.
Yeah, that was great, man. And I don't know why my jaw still hits the floor when I hear this stuff. Like I just still am flummoxed by it. To me, like, as somebody, raised dogmatic, the concept of a human being infallible sounds to me heretical.
Right. Yeah. Well, so they would probably nuance it a little bit. They would say these people are not infallible. And so there are social conventions within this space. I mean, you asked the question about how does somebody kind of step into one of these leadership roles? Well, it really is an apprenticeship system. They don't have conventional seminaries. A lot of these leaders these Christian leaders that surround Trump are not conventionally trained leaders in any sense. They don't have a master's in divinity from an accredited seminary. Many of them are just apprenticed. They grow up in these non-denominational churches. They decide they want to go into leadership there. Some other mentor, be it a pastor or apostle or prophet, mentors them into this kind of leadership role. And this is all they've ever known, right? This is the skill set they've learned. And these are very talented people. They aren't highly educated people, but they're very intelligent, very good at what they do, very good at marketing, very good at selling themselves as kind of fulfilling these roles. And the way that you gain a following is you operate within this kind of charisma. Right? You say, I have this special anointing, and hey, I've got a prophecy for you, right? And if that's convincing to people, then they start following you. And so the titles like apostle or prophet, well, those attach to people because there's a community that sees them that way, right? That views them that way, that it gives them that authority. And right now, the way to get ahead in that world is to only issue pro-Trump messages. Because there's almost an unfulfillable appetite among the audience to hear pro-Trump theological messages. Because a lot of Christians attach themselves to Trump, not necessarily for theological reasons originally, but then they wanted theology to justify it. And the NAR has been supplying that for the last decade in spades. And it has become this kind of mythos around Trump that I would argue was very instrumental in getting him back into office in 2024, right? These prophecies around Trump, these kind of messianic prophecies, there was a step change in the way that they were used after the assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania. And if you have listened to Trump's own rhetoric, he has integrated that into his narrative. He has been adopting a much more spiritual framing, a much more theological framing of his own presidency. And sometimes that is scripted and you can tell that somebody else wrote it. Sometimes it's off the cuff. And he's actually speaking sincerely, I think, or at least as sincerely as Donald Trump is, right? And as much as he taps into any sort of sincerity, I think he really believes that God has put him in office for this purpose of what he's accomplishing now. And if anything, I'd argue that makes him more dangerous.
Mm-hmm. Is this, I keep thinking about this because, one of the things that, and for folks who are here with us who are not super versed in the religious theological aspects of all this, and I was not when I started researching the Pence book. I did not know what a Cyrus prophecy was when I started, working on it. I'd never heard of this stuff before. The prophetic books of the Bible, as Catholics, we're walled off from that stuff. Okay, probably for the better, especially seeing whatever this NAR stuff is. All right, maybe we are not meant to pluck from the tree of knowledge.
And I guess I would question the word knowledge in this instruction. I mean, there certainly is a claim of knowledge there, right? But it's remarkable how many of the prophecies, A, fit their political agenda, and B, happen to map onto and make them seem great, right? So yes, but the thing is, like, people truly believe this stuff. Like, don't mistake the showmanship for the followership, right? Because the followers sincerely believe this stuff, and that's what my book is about. And in fact, most of the leaders who are saying this stuff, they sincerely believe it too. This is kind of a totalizing identity for them, and they're true believers. And part of my book is trying to show, how do you get from kind of wild charismatic prophecies about Trump to January 6th and Christians centrally participating in this attack on our democracy? Well, it's through this kind of radicalization that can go on through these prophecies, through these theologies, through these ideas like the 7 mountains, that Christians are supposed to control society. Well, if that's God's will, maybe democracy is a barrier to accomplishing God's will. And maybe we just need to force this thing through because God has said this is his will.
Yeah. As a couple days ago, I was talking with my kiddo about Columbus Day, and depending on where you are, what you think, how you feel, it has different names these days. And the most surprising thing to me was that school was still open, so I had to adjust for that and show up to work on Monday. What is today? Today's Tuesday. Okay, that was yesterday. All right. And we were talking about perspectives on things. I was trying to be like, all right, she'll be 9 pretty soon, and I was like, well, why Columbus Day versus Indigenous Peoples Day? What was the perspective of Columbus sailing here to what he and all of Europe end up calling the New World, versus the indigenous people, the natives, who were already here, and they saw him and they're like, well, hey, who's the new guy? All right. And your perspectives on things. And I think about that a lot with January 6th, especially with regards to what you just said, because so many people, and we saw this in the court testimony. I mean, thousands of cases, or more than 1,000 cases, but just reams of court testimony where people said they were called there by God. All right. This is, even if it was not taken under oath, I still give it incredible weight, because this is the mindset, right? Not just called there by God, but called there by the president of the United States, who was telling them to launch this. Now that it's in, and again, right, the perspective of it, flip it around. It's not in their world. It's not an insurrection.
Right.
It's saving the country.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And that's the thing. The people who stormed the Capitol, they did not think we are overturning democracy. They thought they were saving democracy.
Yeah.
And this is what can happen in this information environment, this disinformation and misinformation environment, right? People get locked in their echo chambers. And some of those echo chambers, like for probably many of your listeners, right? It's the mainstream media echo chamber and the kind of elite college educated media chamber, right? Where it's like, my world seems totally rational to me, and I just don't understand why the majority of the country doesn't agree with me. But there's other echo chambers on the right and the far right that once you get locked into those, you're cut off from reality. Like if you're reading the mainstream news, hopefully you're pretty in touch with reality. You might have a kind of narrow cultural consensus, but you at least are understanding the factual world as it exists. For a lot of the people who participated in January 6th, all of their news media was coming through prophets and was being filtered through social media. And you can see this. I mean, this was what I did to write the book, was I went back and looked at the social media profiles of a lot of the Christians who were there. Who are they referencing? What ideas are they referencing? What memes are they posting? And it was all coming out of this kind of prophecy-driven idea of Donald Trump as this anointed figure. And there were hundreds of prophets before the 2020 election who claimed that they had individually received prophecies that Donald Trump was destined to win that election. And so what you hear over and over again by the people who participated in January 6th was they kept saying, all the prophets can't be wrong. So this must be God's will, and we just need a miracle to intervene and stop this election so that God's will be done.
Oh man, we have to do another one of these, because I have more questions. I have deeper questions. Okay, this is part 1. We have to because I just got too many. You probably I'm sure you saw that for a number of folks, the end of the world was supposed to be like 2 weeks ago. Was that it?
The rapture.
23rd? Yeah. I found this to be very interesting when I was listening to your pod. That there's always been a debate in the Protestant world and the evangelical world about the dispensations or the epochs of humanity as put forth by the Bible, and how the end of the world will happen, whether the righteous will be raptured, and of note, guys, and if you're ever curious about this stuff, one of the reasons why it's so important, the evangelizing piece of this is I still get chills thinking about all this stuff, because it comports with what we're living through politically. All right. Is the word of God must be spread to every human, every living human, so that they may have a choice in the matter. All right. And then those that accept Jesus will be raptured to heaven. And then those who do not will be stuck here on earth to live through tribulation. And now what's crazy about this is that for kind of your old line evangelicals, people that I used to consider to be the Christian right, really I don't think they're in control anymore. For the NAR folks, we are in the tribulation.
Yeah, and this is where we are experiencing right now. It's still an ongoing thing. This seismic shift in the central theology and ideology of American evangelicalism, and so part of what's happening. So what you saw in this recent kind of dust up about the rapture, that was not coming out of dispensationalist camps, which you're referencing, right? That's the kind of old school rapture theology. Old school rapture theology that kind of starts after the Civil War is this idea of, there's these dispensations, and if you just read the Bible in this hyper systematic way, you can actually kind of predict the outline of the future. That's dispensationalism. That's where the idea of the rapture originally comes from. That was not what started this. This was actually a charismatic South African prophet who kind of came out of nowhere. Nobody had ever heard of him, went on a podcast and claimed that God had revealed to him the date of the rapture. This was back in the early summer that he claimed this. And he names this date. And then a bunch of other prophets jumped on because, right, this is how you gain followers, these kind of obscure prophet guys on YouTube and other places around the world jumped on and said, I have confirmation. God spoke to me that is an accurate prophecy. And so it bounces around the echo chamber. Millions of Christians who are paying attention to these prophecy narratives and circles online buy into that narrative and start preparing for the rapture, right? This was not coming out of old school dispensationalism or some new reading of the Bible. This guy claimed that it had been revealed to him directly by God. And then there's this massive media ecosystem built by charismatic leaders, televangelism networks, prophecy networks that all kind of carried that message because that's good content, right? People will pay attention to that. And people started acting in quite wild ways because they bought into this kind of prophecy from somebody they'd never heard of.
I can't. To me, it's like when it feels to me like when partisans jump into the news space and claim to be reporters and are just plagiarizing our work.
Right.
And not just plagiarizing it, but plagiarizing it incorrectly, getting it wrong with zero consequences. And I still have hair upon my head, of note. But dear God, I just okay. I gotta wrap this up here at 1. This is part 1, guys. This is. If you want to know what's going on, we got to talk about this. Yeah. This is the intersection of religion and politics. And as much as folks say that they don't want to talk about this, they don't want to touch the raw nerve. Well, there are people who are living on that raw nerve right now, and they're running things. Okay. So we have to understand it. Matt Taylor, where do we find you? Where can we get your work? Where can we support you?
So I'm on Substack, as you mentioned, Matthew D. Taylor. I'm on blue sky. I'm still on Twitter technically. I try to not immerse myself in Twitter very much these days. It is just a fever swamp. I like I said, I work at the Institute for Islamic, Christian, and Jewish Studies, icjs.org. We have all kinds. We're a public-facing institute, interreligious dialogue institute. We have all kinds of programs that are open to the public for free. We have a YouTube channel, and I have a new podcast actually coming out this month called. It's with my friend Susan Hayward, who used to work at the United States Institute of Peace. And the title of the podcast is American Unexceptionalism. And the idea is we're interviewing experts in experiences of religious nationalism and democracy around the world to speak into our American situation. So we've got experts from Turkey and from Poland and from Brazil and from Myanmar and Sri Lanka and India talking about what they've seen in this confluence of far-right religious nationalism and anti-democratic politics and the resistance movements, and trying to learn lessons from how others have approached this and what they've seen around the world.
Wow. This is well, I'll be following down that rabbit hole once it publishes.
Great.
Okay. Matt, thank you, man. Okay, coming back. All right. So this is part one, guys. All right.
Sounds good.
Dude, so good. Matt, thank you, brother. This is incredible.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
All right, man.
Thanks.
Before we head out, guys, I need to take a second to just process. This is heavy stuff and important. All right. So that's part one. All right. And if you missed the top of this, I'll be putting it up on the YouTube and sending out the newsletter in a little bit, and you can catch the encore at 8 p.m. Matt is just, I was listening to his charismatic revival fury because, as the Pence person, I kind of live at that intersection, reported at that intersection of faith and politics and January 6th in perpetuity. And I was just, I could not stop listening to it. And every time we have like a news blip like this, alleged end of the world, a South African pastor with a following. That's right. That's what happened. I'm still flummoxed by all of this. We have to understand this stuff. And I'm so grateful to Matt for all his work. That's part one, guys. We didn't even touch on the heavy stuff directly dialed in to the White House. All right. So we're going to have to get to that in part two. All right. Before I head out, reminder, sign up 24site.news, 24sight.news. If you got questions, comments, whatnot. Here, you know what? Ian's on the board. Let's see. We got some comments here. Question. Here's Jeannie Elby. If Kidstan believes in standards, he should resign for incompetence. Yeah. Oh, Texas education. Yes, absolutely. Here we go. Should American Christians be concerned by the recent martyrdom canonization of Charlie Kirk? Ooh, that's a good one. Okay, we're gonna, part two. I'm gonna bank these. All right. One more. Let's see. Okay, I'm gonna bank these for part two because, unlike Joe Rogan, we don't do 2 hours or 3 hours, but maybe we will soon. When we get good guests like this, it has me thinking that maybe we ought to be planning for 2 and 3 hour pods. Drop a note, guys. And let me know what you think of the format. All right, because this is all, we're still developing all this. Let me know what you think, what you'd like to see, what you'd like to see more of, what you'd like to see less of. All right. Tomorrow on the show, doing a shutdown, we're talking with Julie Grace Prufke, got Mike Sarasso, longtime Democratic consultant, is going to be on. Thursday, we're doing New Jersey, and Friday, mystery polling, a surprise on Friday. All right, guys, I'm Tom Lobianco. Thanks for being here. It's a pleasure always to be with you, and it is our fundamental right as Americans. And I love exercising that right with you every damn day. See you tomorrow.